The cold steel of the barrel pressed into the soft skin beneath my chin, forcing my head back until I was staring at the cracked neon lights of the club's basement. My breath came in shallow, jagged hitches that smelled of expensive champagne and copper. Above me, Tiffany leaned in, her manicured nails digging into my shoulder, her face twisted into a mask of jagged delight that no amount of designer makeup could hide. She didn't look like the heiress the tabloids adored. She looked like a predator that had finally cornered its prey. The hum of the bass from the dance floor upstairs vibrated through the floorboards, a heartbeat for a party I was never supposed to survive. Tiffany leaned closer, her breath hot against my ear, whispering words that were drowned out by the metallic click of the safety being switched off. This was the moment the world stopped. This was the moment a girl who spent her mornings scrubbing floors and her nights dodging debt collectors became the center of a war that would burn half of Seoul to the ground. You see the diamonds, the blood on the white marble, and the way the most feared man in the country eventually looked at me, but you don't see the path of broken glass I had to walk to get there. There is a price for stepping into the shadows of the elite, a debt paid in secrets and scars. By the time the sun rose, names would be erased from history, and the woman staring down a gun would be the only one left standing. 4 hours earlier, the night had a different rhythm. I adjusted the black apron over my hips, the cheap fabric itching against my skin. My reflection in the industrial kitchen mirror showed a girl with tired eyes and a smudge of flour on her cheek. I wiped it away with a trembling hand. The Golden Lily wasn't just a club, it was a cathedral for the people who owned the city. My job was simple: carry the trays, ignore the insults, and stay invisible. If I could just finish this shift, I'd have enough for my mother's medication. I pushed through the swinging doors into the VIP lounge. The air was thick with the scent of oud and ego. At the center table sat Tiffany, surrounded by a court of sycophants who laughed at jokes that weren't funny. She spotted me immediately. Her eyes narrowed, tracking my movement like a hawk watching a field mouse. I kept my head down, focusing on the tray of crystal flutes I was carrying. My boots made no sound on the plush carpet. I reached their table, my fingers tightening on the silver edge of the tray as I felt the collective gaze of the group shift toward me. "Waitress," Tiffany's voice cut through the music, sharp and cold as an icicle. I stopped, my spine stiffening. "Yes, miss? You're late. And you're ugly. Does the management know they're hiring help from the gutter now?" She reached out, her hand moving in a blur, and tipped the tray. Glass shattered. It wasn't a crash, it was a symphony of destruction. Shards flew, sparkling like falling stars before embedding themselves in the carpet. Champagne soaked through my stockings, the sting of the alcohol hitting the small cuts on my legs. The lounge went silent. Every head turned. Tiffany didn't look away, she smirked, waiting for me to cry. Instead, I knelt. My knees hit the wet fabric and I began to pick up the pieces with my bare hands. A jagged edge sliced into my thumb. A bead of dark red blood welled up, dripping onto the white tablecloth. "Clean it up with your tongue," one of the men at the table barked, and the group erupted into braying laughter. I didn't look up. I kept working, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. But then the laughter died. It didn't fade, it was cut off as if by a knife. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. A shadow fell over me, long and suffocating. I looked at the floor and saw a pair of handmade Italian leather shoes, polished to a mirror finish. They didn't move. They stood right in the center of the spilled wine and broken glass. I followed the line of the impeccably tailored charcoal trousers up to a hand resting idly at a man's side. On his pinky was a signet ring, a black dragon coiled around a blood-red ruby. My breath hitched. I knew that ring. Everyone in the underworld knew that ring. Slowly I lifted my gaze. Standing over me was Kenji Sato, the man they called the Ghost of Seoul. The man who had disappeared 3 years ago after a massacre that left the harbor red. He wasn't looking at Tiffany. He wasn't looking at the crowd. His dark, impenetrable eyes were fixed entirely on the blood dripping from my thumb. He reached down, his movements slow and deliberate, and wrapped his gloved hand around my wrist. He pulled me up from the floor with a strength that felt like iron wrapped in silk. Tiffany's face went pale, the bravado draining out of her until she looked like a ghost. "Kenji? Oh, we were just having some fun," she stammered, her voice trembling. Kenji didn't acknowledge her. He didn't even blink. He took a white silk handkerchief from his pocket and began to wrap it around my bleeding hand. His touch was strangely light. "The fun is over," he said. His voice was a low growl that vibrated in my very bones. He finally turned his head to look at Tiffany, and for the first time, I saw what true terror looked like in a person's eyes. "Apologize," Kenji commanded. "What?" Tiffany gasped. She's just a waitress. Do you know who my father is? Kenji stepped toward her, and the two bodyguards behind him moved in unison, their hands disappearing under their jackets. The entire VIP section scrambled back, chairs screeching against the floor. I know exactly who your father is, Kenji whispered, leaning over the table. And by tomorrow morning, he will be a man who owns nothing but the clothes on his back if you don't get on your knees and beg this woman for her forgiveness. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Tiffany looked around at her friends, but they all looked at the floor. She looked at me, her lip quivering. Slowly, agonizingly, she began to slide out of her chair. Her knees hit the floor, the same spot where I had been kneeling seconds before. I'm sorry, she choked out. Kenji looked at me, an unspoken question in his eyes. I didn't feel victory. I felt a cold, dawning realization. This man didn't save me because he was a hero. He saved me because he recognized me. And if he recognized me, it meant my past, the one I had spent 5 years burying, had finally crawled out of its grave. He leaned in close, his scent of sandalwood and cold rain filling my senses. Hello, Minhee, he whispered. It's been a long time since the palace burned. My heart stopped. He knew my real name. He knew everything. He turned back to his men, his face returning to that terrifying, expressionless mask. Bring the car. We're leaving. He didn't ask if I wanted to go. He simply kept his hand locked on my wrist and began to lead me through the stunned crowd. As we passed the bar, I saw my manager shaking, holding a phone to his ear. I knew what he was doing. He was calling the police, or worse, he was calling Tiffany's father. We reached the heavy steel doors of the back exit. Kenji pushed them open and the cold night air hit my face. But we didn't walk to a car. We walked straight into a circle of 6 black SUVs, their engines idling like growling beasts. From the shadows, a dozen men emerged, all wearing the same black dragon pin. Kenji stopped and looked down at me, his eyes searching mine. If you step into this car, Minhee, there is no going back to the life you built here. The waitress dies tonight. Do you understand? I looked at the club doors, then at the man holding my hand. I thought of the debt, the fear, and the girl I used to be. I took a breath and stepped toward the open door of the lead SUV. But as I reached for the handle, a red laser dot appeared on Kenji's chest, dancing right over his heart. The SUV door didn't just open, it became a shield. Kenji's hand slammed against my shoulder, shoving me down into the leather interior as the first crack of a high-caliber rifle echoed off the brick alley walls. The window of the car behind us shattered into 1,000 crystal diamonds. Get in. Drive. Kenji roared. The tires screamed against the pavement, the smell of burnt rubber filling the cabin as we lurched forward. My head hit the headrest, my vision swimming. Beside me, Kenji was already on a radio, his voice a series of clipped, rhythmic commands in a language I hadn't heard in years. He didn't look hit. He didn't even look surprised. He looked like a man who had finally found the war he'd been looking for. The ghost's debt. I stared at the white silk handkerchief around my thumb, now soaked through with dark crimson. If you believe that a girl from the slums deserved a protector like Kenji, hit the like button so this story finds the people who need to know that even in the dark, you are never truly alone. Who are they? I managed to gasp, my voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. Kenji didn't look at me. He was watching the side mirror as a pair of headlights gained on us, weaving through the midnight traffic of the Han River Bridge. People who realize that as long as you are alive, their claim to the throne is a lie. I don't want a throne, I whispered, my fingers digging into the seat. I wanted to pay for my mother's heart pills. Kenji finally turned. His eyes weren't cold anymore, they were burning with an intensity that made me want to shrink away. Your mother didn't die of a weak heart, Minhee. She died of a weak poison. And the woman who ordered it just watched you kneel in that club. The car swerved hard to the left. A black sedan tried to ram our rear quarter panel, the screech of metal on metal sending sparks flying past the window like horizontal rain. Kenji reached into the center console and pulled out a heavy, matte black handgun. He didn't aim out the window. He aimed at the floorboards between my feet. Pull the lever, he commanded. I looked down. There was a small, recessed handle hidden under the floor mat. My hands shook so violently I couldn't grip it. I can't. Do it or we both die on this bridge. I lunged forward, my fingers catching the cold metal. I pulled. With a heavy thud, the rear of the SUV deployed a spray of steel caltrops. Behind us, the pursuing sedan's tires exploded instantly. The car flipped, a chaotic roll of twisting steel and shattered glass that ended in a fireball that lit up the entire rearview mirror. Kenji didn't cheer. He didn't even exhale. He grabbed his phone and dialed a single number. It started. Secure the safe house. And bring the doctor. The princess is bleeding. I'm not a princess, I snapped, the adrenaline finally turning into a sharp, jagged anger. I'm a waitress who smells like cheap champagne and failure. You are the only daughter of the House of Kong, Kenji said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. And tonight we're going to remind Seoul why that name used to make people stop breathing. We pulled into a nondescript underground parking garage in the heart of Gangnam. The concrete walls were damp, smelling of oil and old secrets. As the engine died, the silence felt heavier than the gunfire. Kenji got out and opened my door. He offered his hand again. This time I didn't hesitate. I took it. We walked toward a service elevator. Inside, he pressed a sequence of buttons that didn't correspond to any floor. We began to descend. Why now? I asked, watching the floor numbers flicker and vanish. Why wait 5 years to find me? Because for 5 years I was building an army, Kenji said. And for 5 years they thought I was dead. But most importantly, because tomorrow is the anniversary of the fire. The day they think they finished us. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a room that looked like a high-tech war room. Screens covered the walls, showing live feeds of the city, and racks of tactical gear lined the far side. 6 men stood at attention the moment Kenji stepped out. Report, Kenji barked. Tiffany's father has mobilized the local police, one of the men said, his eyes darting to me with a mix of awe and suspicion. They've put a bounty on the waitress for the attempted kidnapping of an heiress. The borders are closing. Kenji laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He turned to me, reaching out to brush a stray hair from my forehead. His fingers were calloused but surprisingly gentle. They think they're hunting a girl, he whispered. They don't realize they've just walked into a trap set by a ghost. He turned back to his men, his face hardening into stone. Prepare the breach teams. We aren't leaving the city. We're taking it back. I stood in the center of the cold, fluorescent room looking at the screens. On one of them, I saw a grainy image of my mother's old apartment building. There were men in suits standing outside. My heart hammered. They weren't just after me. They were erasing everything I had ever touched. I need to go back, I said, my voice steady for the first time that night. Kenji stopped. He looked at me, his brow furrowed. It's a death sentence. I left something there, I said, my jaw tightening. A list. My mother kept a list of every person who visited her in the hospital. If she was poisoned, the name is on that paper. Kenji stared at me for a long beat. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. Maybe you are a Kong after all. He gestured to the racks of gear. Suit up. We're going back to the gutter. We didn't take the SUVs. We took 2 matte black motorcycles, weaving through the narrow, rain-slicked alleys of the old district where the neon signs flickered like dying stars. I clung to Kenji's back, the heat of his body the only thing keeping me from shivering. We arrived at the apartment complex. It was a crumbling concrete tomb. Kenji dismounted, his movements fluid and silent. He handed me a small earpiece. Stay behind me. If I say run, you don't look back. You head for the roof. We moved up the stairs, the air smelling of cabbage and damp wood. We reached the 4th floor. My door was kicked in, hanging off a single hinge. Inside, the small space had been turned upside down. My mother's pillows were ripped open, the feathers looking like snow in the moonlight. I ran to the kitchen, my knees hitting the linoleum. I reached under the loose floorboard beneath the sink. My fingers brushed against a cold, metal tin. I pulled it out. I have it, I whispered. Minhee, move. Kenji's voice was a whip crack. A flashbang grenade skittered across the floor, detonating in a blinding white roar of sound and light. My ears rang with a high-pitched scream. I felt hands grabbing my jacket, dragging me backward. I tried to fight, but a cloth was pressed over my mouth, sweet, chemical-smelling. The last thing I saw was Kenji standing in the doorway, a knife in each hand, disappearing into a cloud of smoke as the shadows of a dozen men closed in around him. I woke up tied to a cold, metal chair in a room that smelled like salt and diesel. My head throbbed, each beat of my heart feeling like a hammer blow. Across from me, sitting on a crate, was Tiffany. She was still wearing her party dress, but it was stained with dirt. In her hand, she held the metal tin I had risked everything for. You really should have stayed in the gutter, Sarah, or should I call you princess? She smiled, and this time she pulled the trigger of the small gold-plated pistol in her hand. The bullet didn't hit me. It hit the leg of the chair, sending a vibration of pure terror through my body. Where is he? Tiffany hissed, leaning in so close I could see the broken capillaries in her eyes. "Where is Kenji Sato?" I looked at her, my throat raw. I didn't say a word. I looked past her, toward the heavy steel door of the warehouse. I saw the small red light of a security camera blink twice. He was here. "If you think I'm going to talk," I rasped, "you've never had to survive on the streets." Tiffany screamed in frustration and raised the gun to my forehead. "I'll kill you now and find him myself." "You can try," a voice boomed from the rafters, echoing with a haunting metallic quality. "But I think your father would prefer it if you stayed alive for the trade." The roof vanished. Not literally, the skylights shattered inward as four figures rappelled down on high-speed lines. The warehouse erupted into a chaos of suppressed gunfire and shouting. Tiffany spun around, firing wildly, but a flash of black movement caught her. Kenji landed like a cat, his hand catching her wrist and twisting it until the gold pistol clattered to the floor. He didn't stop. He spun her around, his arm locking across her throat. "Check the girl?" Kenji yelled. One of his men sprinted to me, slicing my zip ties with a combat knife. I collapsed forward, my legs like jelly. I looked up just in time to see the warehouse doors burst open. A man stepped through, flanked by 30 armed guards. He was older, with silver hair and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. Tiffany's father. The man who had stolen my birthright. "Let her go, Sato," the man said, his voice calm, like he was discussing a business merger. "And maybe I'll let the girl live as a servant in my house." Kenji tightened his grip on Tiffany. "You've spent 5 years sitting in a chair that belongs to a dead man, Chairman Choi. Tonight you stand. I have the police. I have the Port Authority. You have a waitress and a few shadows." Choi laughed. "Kill them all." As the guards raised their rifles, I saw the list. It had fallen out of the tin during the scuffle. It was lying in a puddle of oil near my feet. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and grabbed it. I looked at the last name on the list. The person who had visited my mother an hour before she died. It wasn't Tiffany's father. I looked up at Kenji, the man who had saved me twice in one night. The man who had been my father's most trusted lieutenant. The name on the list was Kenji Sato. My blood turned to ice. I looked at the man holding Tiffany, the man who had led me here, into the heart of his enemy's lair. He wasn't protecting me from them. He was using me as bait to draw Choi out so he could take the chair for himself. I stood up, the list clutched in my hand. "Kenji!" I screamed. He looked at me and for a split second the mask slipped. I saw the truth. The same hunger I had seen in Tiffany's eyes. "The fire," I whispered, my voice carrying through the sudden silence of the standoff. "You didn't save me from the fire. You started it." The world seemed to tilt. Kenji didn't deny it. He just looked at me with a profound, terrifying sadness. "I did what was necessary for the family, Minhee. You were too soft. Your father was too soft." "Drop the gun," Choi commanded, sensing the shift. "No," I said, stepping between the two armies. I looked at the chairman, then at the ghost. "If you want the Kong legacy, you have to go through the last Kong." I pulled a small silver lighter from my pocket, the one I used to light the candles in the club. I held the list over the puddle of oil. "This list contains the offshore accounts my father hid." I lied, my voice resonant. "Every cent of the Kong fortune. If I drop this, we all go up in flames and you both end up with nothing. If you believe Minhee has the strength to burn it all down to get her revenge, subscribe now to see how the Forgotten Princess becomes the most dangerous woman in the underworld." Kenji's eyes widened. "Minhee, don't." "You called me a waitress," I said, looking at Tiffany's father. "You called me a ghost," I said to Kenji. "But you forgot one thing." I flicked the lighter. The flame danced, a tiny, orange spark in the darkness. "I'm the one who knows how to clean up the mess." I dropped the lighter. The oil ignited with a low whoosh, a wall of fire erupting between the two factions. The heat was instantaneous, blistering. In the confusion, I turned and ran toward the back shipping containers. I didn't head for the exit. I headed for the crane controls. If I couldn't have my life back, I would make sure they never left this dock. As the flames climbed higher, licking at the crates of munitions stored in the back, I saw Kenji breaking through the fire, his clothes smoldering. He looked like a demon rising from hell. He wasn't coming to save me. He was coming for the paper. I reached the control booth and slammed my hand onto the emergency release. Above us, a 10-ton shipping container groaned, its steel cables snapping with the sound of gunshots. It fell. The sound was deafening. The ground shook. Dust and smoke choked the air. When it cleared, the path between me and the exit was open, but the warehouse was a furnace. I saw Choi's men fleeing. I saw Tiffany screaming as she was dragged away by her father. And I saw Kenji. He was pinned under the edge of the container, his legs crushed. He looked at me, reaching out a hand, blood coughing from his lips. Minky. I walked over to him. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing at all. I leaned down and tucked the list, the real list which I had kept in my pocket while burning a decoy, into his vest. My mother's name was on your list, I whispered. Now your name is on mine. I turned and walked out of the warehouse as the first of the explosions began to rock the foundations. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the pier. The sun was beginning to rise over the Seoul skyline, painting the water in shades of bruised purple and gold. I took a deep breath of the salt air. My apron was gone. My name was gone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the black dragon ring. I had swiped it from Kenji's finger when I tucked in the list. I held it up to the light. The waitress was dead. The princess was a memory. I tossed the ring into the dark water of the harbor. Time to start a new business, I whispered to the wind. I walked toward the city, a girl with no past and a very dark future. The war wasn't over. It was just under new management.